Well, look, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure, not only to be here, but to be here in person. I think I've probably spoken to some of you virtually over video conference, but for those of you that I haven't, my name's Surman. I work for Defra, and I work for the Biosecurity and Borders programme, and I deal with all issues of plant health associated with the border, whether that's imports, exports, or topically, at the moment, trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Protocol arrangements. And I want to give you a brief update of where we are at the moment on those border arrangements. Now, I will give you a very quick run through what's happened in the last 18 months, but what I really want to do is focus on what's happening now and what's going to be happening over the next 18 months, because I think they are enormously important for the industry. I think these are really important times, and we have a window of opportunity to shape a very new version of how border controls operate, in which your contributions are going to be vitally important. So, very briefly, looking at where we are, and don't worry too much, lots of text on here. I don't know whether these slides get shared, but I'll just pick out some of the highlights, which is to say that you will all, if you're involved in the imports of plants from the EU, you will all be acutely aware that things have changed very radically since the beginning of last year, and that is because that was the point at which the transition period for the UK's exit from the EU concluded, and we ceased to be part of the single market. And at that point, we introduced controls on imports of plants from the EU to replace the controls that existed before that within the single market, which was the plant passporting regime. So the passporting regime came to an end, and that has been replaced with import controls. And that has meant that plants now coming in from the EU have to come in with a phytosanitary certificate. You have to pre-notify us that they're coming in, and we subject them to risk-based checks. Now, there was going to be a radical change coming up very soon on the 1st of July. So at the moment, those checks that we're performing on EU plants happen at destination. So that might be your business's premises. The intention, the plan had been that on the 1st of July, in a week's time or so, those checks would have to move from destination to border control posts or control points. Now that has changed. So on the 28th of April, ministers announced that that was not going to happen. There would be no further changes this year to the way that border controls operate. But very importantly, what they also made clear is that this wasn't just a change to the timetable. This was an opportunity for us to step back, reset and revisit how border controls operate and take a radical and new approach to the way that the border can operate to make sure that we have the most efficient, most effective border that still delivers on biosecurity in the way that we absolutely need it to. So we have been tasked with preparing something called a target operating model. So this is effectively a description of the way that the border will operate when we introduce new controls, when we make changes during the course of next year. This target operating model, we are applying 5 key tests to this target operating model. So first and foremost, and it won't surprise you since I'm from Defra to hear this, the first and foremost priority for us is biosecurity. We absolutely have to have a system that protects our biosecurity nationally. It is a critical component of our broader national security interests to protect food supply, to make sure that we have a vibrant and productive horticultural sector, to make sure that our environment is protected. So it is crucial. So we are not changing our risk appetite for biosecurity. That remains the same. We have to have world-leading standards of biosecurity. But we can achieve that, we believe, in a way that is slicker, more efficient, less burdensome and less costly to industry, and that's the challenge that we're faced with. I think the only other point I want to bring out on this slide is that we're also very conscious that we want to try and grow our exports, and we can only grow our exports if we have trading partners that are willing to import from us, and trading partners will only be willing to import plants and plant products if they are confident about the reliability of our own domestic SPS controls, of our own plant health controls, which includes checks at the border. So there are 4 key themes that are playing into the development of this new target operating model, which we will publish, by the way, in the autumn. So the first is that we need to make sure we have a regime that is global. What that means is that we need to make sure that our import controls treat all of our third country trading partners consistently. At the moment, we have a regime which positively discriminates in favour of EU imports. So there are lower levels of checks on EU imports than there are of equivalent material coming in from the rest of the world. And that has to stop. And that has to stop partly because we have rules under the World Trade Organization, but also because we have to recognise that the EU is not actually a lower risk source. Actually, the EU, unfortunately, has pest and disease established and spreading, which we are really worried about. Things like Xylella, things like pine processionary moth, emerald ash borer. The EU, unfortunately, as I say, is not a low risk source, and so we need to protect ourselves, but in a way that is proportionate and enables business to carry on as efficiently as possible. We also need to simplify the regime. We want a regime that is really lean, that is really focused on the risks that we're worried about. And so we want a regime that looks nimble, that is really targeted. And we want a regime that operates digitally. So we want to digitise the processes, and I'll move on to that in a moment. But digitisation, I think, is a really core component, and one that you will feel the benefits of, I'm absolutely certain. But even once we've simplified, globalised and digitised, there will still be processes left that you have to engage with as businesses, and we want to make sure that they're completely streamlined, that they're as painless as possible.